Mic check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, I'm out there trying to find the coolest stories I can find. High and low, east to west, north, south, wherever I can. And this time, I'm taking you all the way to the east to beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia, where my good friend John Marshall is. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Max. A little bit of a weather bomb here, but nobody worries about the weather.
No, we were just talking, here in Saskatchewan, we got our blizzards last week. Now we're sitting in minus 30s and minus 40s. You guys are getting the snow this week, but I don't think you're going to get the minus 40s like we do.
No, we don't get there, but we get Nova Scotia gets the fluctuation. It gets it went from minus 14. Now it's raining here now, and then it's going to drop below zero at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and
and everything will be frozen.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So let's start at the beginning here, John. Because I've known you, but I've never sat you down and asked for the life story. So this is going to be interesting for me because I've known you professionally and we've had a lot of fun together.
Yeah.
But for yourself, let the people know. Where did you start? You've been in the industry a long, long time, well before me. So where were you born? Let's start at the start.
Can you see this shirt, Max?
No, I can just see your head. You'd have to stand up to see this shirt. Fogtown. Okay.
That's St. John's, Newfoundland.
Okay.
I was born there, and I wasn't a very good student in going up through I cared more about women and hockey than school books. I can tell you that up through high school. But I got out of school, and I did some bartending. I worked for my father for a bit and everything. And then I worked with this guy. Interesting enough, his name was Scab Power.
Scab Power.
Scab Power. And he was about my age, but he used to do body work on cars. And I'm talking polybond and chicken wire, but I liked it. And so I went to College of Trades and Tech, and I applied. This is in the late 70s. And I applied for auto body. They said, well, you only need grade 8 for that. You got your high school. And I said, yes. And they said, well, that's filled up every year very fast. I said, well, what's related? And they said, welding. So I applied for welding. Didn't get in. The next year, I went back again, applied for auto body mechanics. They said, what did you apply for last year? I said, welding. And they said, well, you're better off. You got a better chance to get in for welding. So I applied for welding again. I didn't know what an arc was or an oxyacetylene torch. I didn't know squat. Scab used chicken wire and pop rivets. So I went into welding, and from the first day, I fell in love with it and absorbed it. And again, I wasn't a good student in high school, but I absorbed everything about the welding that I could. So that was in 79. I started there.
Well, let's stop there for a second. Did you have any trades experience in your family? Did you grow up knowing about the trades? In Newfoundland, was it on your radar? As a possibility?
Zero.
Yeah.
My uncle was a carpenter. And he did mostly renovations at the Federation building. But other than that, my grandfather was a mechanic. He worked for Ford Canada for 59 years. And
wow,
that's not a mistake, 59 years. So mechanics is in our blood. And that was about it. I mean, my father, I've been changing brakes since I'm about 13. My father would stand up and fold his arms and jack up the car, take the spring off and put. So, but basics, other than that, no.
All right. So then you're in the welding program. Late 70s here.
Yeah, really liked it. And then somebody came down to recruit from the Halifax dockyard, which their people get the Halifax dockyard and the Irving shipyards mixed up, but the dockyard maintains military vessels, and Irving builds ships and does other stuff. So they came down and they recruited, and I was lucky enough to get an interview. And then they flew me to Halifax. Back then it was Manpower, and they flew me on Manpower dime up for the interview. And I obviously had a successful interview. And I don't even know where I was working then, Max, but I came home. Maybe I was still in grade school, but I came home and my sister said, "There's an envelope for you. You got the job." And my mother said, "How do you know?" My sister Pat, she's an engineer, and she said, Mom said, "How do you know he got the job? You didn't open the envelope." She said, "If it was a rejection letter, it'd be one sheet. This was about a half-inch thick." So she knew I had the job in Halifax. Yeah.
There's documents to sign in there.
Yeah, map and everything. And so July 7th, 1980, I walked into the dockyard and never looked back for over 34 years, just over 34. And I do a little later. We'll talk about a lot about all the learnings that I had in the dockyard with a great apprenticeship and whatnot. And then so that was 34 plus years. Retired at 55. Way too young to retire, and now I'm 65 and talking to Max and enjoying it.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad. Yeah. But if we go back, one of the things that people often think about when they think of the Maritimes out east is the lack of work or the unsteady nature of the work out east. It's going to be either shipyards or mining. It's kind of going to be one of the two. And the mines are up and down. They've closed, they've opened. They've closed, they've opened. Shipyards, they've changed hands a few times, but Irving and Halifax shipyards have been around, back and forth for a long time now.
St. John and Brunswick as well.
That's right. So for yourself, getting into the shipyard business at such an early age here, you're talking 1980, was it for you something that you knew right away, like, I'm going to try to stay on here forever? Because you must have seen lots of layoffs come and go and lots of turns in the industry over 34 years, my friend.
You're exactly right. And so we started July 7th, as I said, and we signed 3 days of signing papers about the government owns your mine, and this is real. They say, well, if you invent something, you don't own it, we own it, up to 5 years and all this. And we signed union papers and credit union and safety, and it was just 3 days really of orientation. So then you get into it, and I did go home the first Christmas, which was obviously December of 1980, and I went over to see my next door neighbor, one of my good buddies, and his father was sitting in the chair, and I said, "Yeah, I can retire when I'm 55." And Doug was the father, and he got up and he said, "You're not even have your feet wet yet, and you're talking about retirement." But it was real, and it did bring me a good retirement at 55. But and when Doug Senior died, I reiterated that story, and it brought the house down because they knew the father and everything. Right? Yeah. But anyway, So the apprenticeship. You started at 70% of the journey person's wages. So every 6 months, we got a 5% raise, and then, which was great. And then after 3 years, you're at journey person's wages. And then we had a premium then if you did high pressure pipe welding. You got 42 cents extra an hour, I think, but there was a lineup for that. It was, you were
you're at the bottom of that list.
Yeah, you were the elite if you were a pipe welder. And then another category was submarine welding, which a submarine classifies as a pressure vessel. So that was my door. I never did get my pipe tickets, but I did get my submarine high pressure. And that was like a little bonus there. And there's, again, lots of stories. I'll talk about submarines in a little bit. But I started in 80, welded for 3 years in the apprenticeship, Then I did a year. You couldn't weld on the submarine until you welded for a year out as a journey person.
As a journey person, yep.
And that was a full training in incline verticals and 110 18s, which are very fluid, as you know.
Yep.
All stick welding then. And then in 87, there was a competition to become a boss, a charge hand. And we thought the older hands would apply for it, but it was a miserable job. It was really a miserable job. So I had two coworkers that applied, and I just said, well, I'm throwing my hat in. I had never expected to win it. So in 87, October of 87, I became a charge hand. And almost 10 years to the month, I'll say, there was a competition for a hull surveyor, which is an inspector.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, so I said 7 years of axial field welding, 10 years of boss, and then the rest of my career was as an inspector.
As an inspector.
Yeah.
Now, when you look back, like to the day you started as a, green as green can be, as green as the kelp on the side of the ocean there, you start coming up in this industry. Back then, like you already mentioned, you're welding, because shipbuilding's, you're looking at inch plates, you're looking at back gouge seams, you're looking at, lots of out of position welding, everything's done in position. And you're running 110-18s, which can be tricky. You'll learn, but it's like trying to throw water on a wall and make it stick. For you must have seen so many advancements in the processes of shipbuilding. Because, I tell you now, you walk into a shipyard now, and it's way different in a lot of ways, right? You got sub-arcs doing the outsides, you got trolleys, you got all these different wire processes. What was it like seeing these changes throughout your career?
Again, another great observation, but we used to have, I can remember when square wave came in.
Right.
The square wave, but 6011 and 7018 is what we used. Mm-hmm. But during your apprenticeship, we learned sub-arc. We used to build up the shafts, the submarine shafts with submerged arc.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like putting it on a trolley. We had to put it in a giant lathe, the shaft, and then build it up with, I think it was 625, Lincoln 625 or something was the underlay, and then we put the Inconel on the shaft.
Right.
That was interesting. We learned blacksmithing, some rigging, but we learned as well, as far as the welding processes go, we learned TIG, a lot of aluminum in shipbuilding, and a lot of stainless steel.
Mm-hmm.
MIG, a lot of aluminum. I don't know if we ever used the MIG in my apprenticeship or steel. Flux core was hardly heard of.
Yeah, that didn't come until the 90s, really, when it got big.
Yeah. And so TIG, MIG, oxyacetylene, plasma was just getting introduced for cutting.
Gouging. Gouging's always been around.
Carbon arc gouging, definitely. That was a big part of it. And we went through the whole process, and we did do pipe. We never got certified or qualified.
Mm-hmm.
And back then we never had Canadian Welding Bureau. We had our own entity with the Dockyard Lab.
Right.
I was fortunate enough to work in that. It's called a DRE, Defense Research Establishment Atlantic, I think it is. And I got to work in there with a brilliant man, Dr. Jim Matthews, and we learned how to break things, and it opens your eyes when you learn how to break things, Max.
You sure do.
The explosion bulge tests, the giant Sharpies, the dynamic tear tests. I don't know if you've ever dealt with that, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a big foot coming down hard. That's what.
yeah, that's for sure. So I was lucky enough to do that. No. And it gives you a different insight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I became boss, my boss, the group foreman, I'll call him, he approached me. He said, "Let's get rid of all the antiquated machines." And we ended up. I ended up getting rid of everything. Had a number, and everything had to be signed back in and accounted for.
Yeah.
But I went out and I think we bought 10 Hobart diesels. I know they were gold or yellow in color, and but that was the start of the getting rid of the antiquated stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to use, I think it was a Lindy for MIG welding for the big guns. It had the slope. I still never understand slope. And what was the other term for the?
There's slope and trim, wasn't it? Was
yes, yeah. But anyway, I never understood, never did understand that. But if somebody set up the machine for me, and then it was like a sliding graph almost, to get that to weld properly. But so that went, and we ended up getting a Cobra. And I don't know if you ever. It was a beautiful gun, push-pull model.
Nice.
Burned the big wire, and I don't even know what power of that, but the gun itself was called a Cobra. And I welded a lot of aluminum, putting bottoms in lighter boats and stuff like this. And all the master aluminum, for weight. Yeah, I did a lot of aluminum welding. And back then, too, we used 5053 and what was it, 40, 46, is it?
40.
Electrodes and 53, 56. One was for cast and one was for drawn metal.
Yeah, 4041, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, something like that. Anyway, so go back to the apprenticeship, we had 4 welders, all very good people.
Mm-hmm.
One guy got approached by the RCMP, and he said, "Can I finish my apprenticeship first?" And they said, "If you want to join the RCMP, you go out west." So he ended up, Steve was his name. He ended up leaving. So now it was down to 3 of us. And I needed an edge, I thought, because I thought the other 2 guys were more capable than I was. So I started taking night courses at TUNS, Technical University of Nova Scotia, part of Dalhousie.
Mm-hmm.
And I go down, George Halliburton was the instructor, and I just started learning a little bit about technical welding. And again, I needed that edge because I thought the other 2 were more proficient than I was. And the way things happened, there was a civilian reduction program, I think around late 80s, early 90s. And then there was layoffs there and people had to go. But as it turned out, the federal government, the way you could get your money and leave, your job had to be redundant. And the job was never going to be offered again.
It was like a terminated position, yeah.
Right, terminated position. So we had a welding inspector, and I don't know, I'm not here to criticize him. I didn't know he was a welding inspector, but he left, and he got a bucket of money. And then when it came up, maybe some critical work came up, somebody realized we don't have a welding inspector.
Right.
And I'm already into, it was WIC then. Remember WIC? Welding Institute of Canada modules?
Yeah.
Before to go to
I got the books behind me.
Yeah, there you go. I probably still got mine. So I already had those modules in. I had some of the technical courses from TUNS. And then my name came up and said, well, we need a welding inspector. And there was other people more experienced, but they never had. I was so close to writing. And anyway, so that's another thing. I'm one of the luckiest people because that brought me into the inspection world.
Yeah.
And so that really worked out for me. And one guy took the civilian reduction program. Another guy is actually, I just reached out to him through LinkedIn. So I was the last one in the welding world that survived the full term.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me to where I am today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, that all worked out for me. But then you get more into the welding inspection and learning
the
how to do things right,
and the
how to do things
metallurgy
right.
and the processes and the
Yes,
procedures. Yeah.
and why it's not all BS. It's because there is a reason for this.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then in the meantime, I became the apprenticeship supervisor, I guess, for the welding, all the new, because we always had
For
a lot of
apprenticeship. Yeah.
apprentices
Yeah.
for a year, and then it's a 3 or 4 year program. And so I got into the teaching part of it too. And then again, we never had Canadian Welding Bureau, and we made some mistakes, and I'll talk about that. And that brought into, okay, we need to get some corrective action here.
Hmm.
And anyway, so I ended up going to Stadacona and teaching the military mostly, but uh, on how to weld. And they did have an instructor, but it wasn't a very efficient program.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we sort of set it up at the same time. We invited Canadian Welding Bureau because there were people leaving the military and they had no certification. What's
Right.
you're an in-house certified. It doesn't get you anything. So
No, as soon as you
Canadian
walk off
Welding,
the property, it's no good.
right. So that's again when Canadian Welding Bureau came in, it changed a lot of things. It changed a lot of attitudes, but it worked.
Hmm.
You know, it because then you have standards, and then again people reject it, but over time it worked. We had different trades because we had very strict trade boundaries, but we did get it that other trades could tack, for example.
Right.
Like sheet metal. There's an awful lot of sheet metal on the ship, and the sheet metal workers weren't allowed to weld or tack. So we brought that in. Iron workers weren't allowed to weld. Most of them could weld. Most of them came from the welding school and then became an iron worker.
Right.
So we integrated the sheet metal to tack up their trunking, say, for ventilation.
Hmm.
Tack the trunking, lay it aside. When the welder comes by, the welder will weld it. And the same for the iron workers. We call them platers.
Hmm.
And the platers would tack it up and then leave it and move on. And so then the welders would come behind. So that was a good step, I thought. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of resistance in that as well. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring up a couple concepts there that I think are interesting to know about you, and they're things that I know about you personally. I've been in the industry since '93. You've been since '80, so you got 13 years on me.
Yeah.
And in my life, I run into a lot of older guys, a lot of mentors, a lot of people that have been in the industry a long time, and I would say that most of them are resistant to learning new stuff. They kind of get stubborn, they get stuck in their ruts, and they're
Old school, Max.
right,
Old
and they're
school.
not good
Yeah.
with change. But you're not one of those people. You've already made a number of examples in your story so far
Yeah.
of where
Yeah.
you weren't stuck. You were looking at the new tech. You were thinking,
Yeah.
there's got to be a better way. You're thinking there's got to be a different way or a
Yeah.
proper process. And that really separates a trade person out from the rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, some old war stories. When we were doing boilers, we had a boiler maker, which around 1980, the boiler trade was dying out because the steamers are gone,
Mhm.
and we're dealing with diesels now. And so it was a 707 um, Certanium, not Certanium, was Certanium a welding company?
I don't
think it was.
remember. I don't remember. Yeah.
Orange colors, orange packaging and stuff. And I think it was a 707.
Mm-hmm.
And we were welding boiler tubes with the 707, and it was like, there was definitely some nickel in it, whatnot. And it was a pretty weld and nice blue finish when you finish. But so we do the boiler tubes, and I learned from this old guy Leo, and he was a really good welder. And he said, "Don't worry about it; they're going to crack anyway." So that was the attitude. Well, they're only going to last with your thermal expansion and contraction and everything.
Yeah.
So, like, he taught me that. He said, "Here's how we weld it," and I never had enough sense then to ask what kind of stainless steel they were made out of.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'll lead up to this brilliant engineer who's no longer with DND, but when he came in, we were looking at processes, and he said, "Why are you welding these tubes with 707?" And I said, "Well, Leo Pace taught me how to do it.
Yeah, that's what he
He
told
probably
me.
learned
Yeah.
it from somebody else." Yeah, tribal knowledge they called it back then,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's a hand me down, it's passed on. So he looked it up. Gordon McDonald looked it up and said, "Well, I can't even remember what it is now. Let's say it was 316 per. I don't think it was that." He said, "Well, if you have 316 stainless, why don't you use 316 electrodes?"
Yeah.
And that was a game changer and an eye opener for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how simple it was. And then we had to do testing and procedures, but guess what? They didn't break.
They didn't break anymore. Wow.
No, well, they still failed because of boiler tubes. That's
Well,
what they do, but still,
they go through a lot of work. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, so that was an eye opener for me how that came about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, do you want me to start on the mistake that we made?
Yeah,
Big mistake.
you alluded to the big mistake, and I love big mistake stories because I got a big mistake story from my life too, like a multi-million-dollar mistake I was a part of,
Right.
and you learn your lessons. So I'd love to hear it.
Yes. So Canada at the time, Canada was one of 3 countries to cut submarines into and weld them back together. I think Germany and Australia were the only other 2 companies at the time. And Gordon McDonald, again, the engineer, was involved with that. So people say, why would you want to do that? Because submarines are cramped, one giant pipe, and you got people of all shapes and sizes, tall and big and small, and anyway, crawling over each other to get their job done. And everybody wanted to do their job. So somebody came up with the idea. If we cut this submarine into, pull the machine, the sub apart, remove the diesels, because submarines are battery electric.
Yeah.
Remove the diesels, we would save 1 full year of man hours by rebuilding the diesels in the shop as opposed to me crawling over your bank or vice versa.
Right.
So that was successful. We had the first time we did it, I was involved with it. We had 16 welders, 24 hours a day, or I believe it was 15 days straight, preheated with the electro blankets and everything was very critical.
Mm-hmm.
One group, we had them at max, I'm going to say 9, I'll say 9 and 2 or 10 and 2, and then from 12 o'clock or from 6 o'clock up one side and then down the other, come up the other.
Yeah.
No group would get ahead of the other group by more than 1 foot. That was it because of distortion.
You'll pull it. Yeah.
Everything was controlled. Again, it's a
big tube, so it'll distort a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very critical. There's more measurements. We had dimensional inspection units there. We have quite the facility, but and it was all 110/18s, if I can recall, 1 inch thick, 25 millimeter thick hull, and it was 20-foot diameter. I'm going back to the old school now because and the interpass temperature couldn't exceed 300 F. So we had to keep it between 250 and 300 F.
Which is nothing. That's just over boiling point, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's, but the metal was so, HY80 was the metal, and it was like a high yield, low alloy. And so it was critical to keep the toughness of the steel. So everybody understood that. We had a lot of fun doing that. So anyway, we did it, and it went through visual, MT, X-ray, every test, and the circularity was relatively good, and everybody was happy. The next time we did it, I think we did it in 9 days, same format.
Yeah.
So that was quite an experience. Again, the teamwork and the coordination for everything. So then we were building, I don't know how many escape hatches or submarine hatches, which are domed and fairly heavy material. So that had its own process. So we worked well with the machine shop and the hydraulic shops, and because it's so integrated, to build them from scratch. Then we had to build an escape tower. And I don't know the reason for that now. I can't remember. So an escape tower, again, it's a cramped tube. It might be a meter in diameter inside with a ladder. And we built it and installed it. And for people that don't know, we Canadians, to my knowledge, to this day, we cannot recover any sailors from the bottom of the ocean floor. We rely on the Americans. It's called a DSRVC, deep sea something. They come down in a mini sub and take you up one at a time up through that tube. It's like a double hatch, like an airlock.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then they lock onto that. So the Americans were involved because their kit had to fit our kit, and they discovered that we used the wrong material in the escape tower.
The whole thing.
The whole tower. Which was probably 6 months.
Wow.
It was. So finger pointing started.
Yeah.
Finger pointing started, and Ottawa came down, Max, and it was a big deal. A big to do. Yes, I mean, this is not a week's work.
No, this is months.
Yes, if not 6 months or more. I can't remember. So then we had to build a new tower. And that's when, who drew the material, right?
Right.
And finger point and all this. So it changed, and this is what I wanted to get across. It changed our whole policy on how to control our metals. And, the process of even ordering material changed. But the biggest factor I got then, and I got involved with the Ottawa group, and it was like, I'm talking 20 people in a room, again, trying to what happened and pointing fingers, and the Americans were in the room, and Ottawa, were in the room. But it turned out that what we did, and again, it wasn't my idea, but I learned a lot. So you take one piece of plate, and it was probably common practice, but it wasn't common practice in the mid 80s, late 80s. We stamped, for example, HY80, the mil spec in that corner, and the last piece of metal used off that plate
gets put away.
That corner.
Yeah.
Right, and it's probably, people are probably shaking their head now. You didn't do that? No, we didn't. The machine shop got involved. They started color coding the ends of all the round stock.
Right.
Because as you know, you cannot tell a piece of copper nickel from stainless steel to fresh
hot roll, cold roll.
Coming out of a lathe. You cannot tell.
No.
And, a magnet helps sometimes. But so anyway, that changed there. And they did stamp some of the round stock color codes. It happened in there. So that was just an example of what can happen. And again, we came through there. That was quite an interesting process too, of getting 100% pen welds in like very difficult to get at places, and how you weld it first and everything, right? So it went in. We passed, once we got past that, and the Americans came up and approved, and everything was good, and then we're back on square one. In the process, again, we talked about the interpass temperature, and you had to be on the job. We said, you want this cleaned up? You want a photocopy? What we want, the grease, the coffee stains of the document that you're sitting on when you're down doing these calcs. So we had to do the heat inputs and everything. And there was one individual, and the numbers weren't accurate. So that was brought to light that was a big inquiry as well. And I made mistakes. Computer were brand new to us, and I got caught cutting and pasting. How did you inspect this on Tuesday when it wasn't welded Thursday, and I was involved with that. And and they believed me, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
I just said, I got caught cut and paste. That was a limited, I'm still limited on computers, but so they bought my story, but the other guy had, uh, the numbers didn't add up. Like
Yeah.
the heat inputs were all wrong. And what happened there, he was, sorry, he was doing them on his desk or something.
Just making
and
it up.
that was
Yeah.
brought,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was brought to light to
Mhm.
me. I never, listen, you do your job, I'll do mine, but I'm doing mine to the best of my ability. And I said, well, you're getting paid to be on the job. Go down on the job.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And it's not all pleasant. Most of it was good, but so it just, why not do it right the first time? We all make mistakes, and there's going to be mistakes made.
I mean,
And
that's the benefit of codes and standards, though, is that
yes,
you got the rule book right in front of you. You don't have to
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel here,
no.
Now, for yourself, you went from welder to boss to inspector. That also gives you a lot more experience than a lot of people that sometimes just go straight to inspector, right? Because
Yes.
you've seen it from the ground up.
Yeah, I had just last month, I had a little controversy, and the guy said he welded it with one process, and I said, I don't think so. And yes, it's right here. Here's where we did it. And I said, you're telling me this is done with this process? I guarantee you it's not done with that. So then their foreman came over and he challenged me, and I challenged him back. And it was not, I don't think the foreman knew. They weren't trying to, well, Weller was obviously trying to pull something over, but I just said, listen, I know what this looks like. I've done it. And I'm telling you, this is not this process. If you want to tell me it is, I'm saying it isn't. And after the foreman called me in his office and he thanked me, and I said, well, I'm just doing my job. And he said, not everybody would pick up on that. And I think he was in the dark on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said, not everybody. And I said, well, you can't bullshit the bullshit because, it's,
You've seen it. You've seen it. Yeah.
Right. Because I again, grew up with it. Right.
Yeah.
And that happened more than once in my career.
Well, once I started teaching at the college, I never seen so much cheating until I became a teacher.
Yes.
And you try to get these kids telling you that they didn't weld on the back of a welded plate or something. It's like,
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
We know.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. I can remember we were down the tank on one of the ships, and I had 3 or 4 apprentices, and we were doing like, call them an egg crate, to fit up all the stiffeners and longitudinals. And I was telling them, they missed sections of it, full sections, but nobody had the leadership in the group. Somebody usually takes, and they were all young. So I had my wire brush and vacuum and cleaned everything up because there's slag everywhere in the bottom of the bilge. And it's new build. So anyway, I explained to them, they're sitting down, and I said, I know you think I'm a freaking an asshole, but there's a reason for this. And here's a prime example. I said, we live in Canada, and we have family and friends that are in the military. And if we don't have this welded right, you want to lose a family member? And I give them a sort of a lecture like that. But then I clean it up and I said, okay, I'm not going to ask who had this section or when you went to break or was it nice? I'm not going to ask that. I'm going to tell you, I'm getting paid to look at every millimeter weld, and I will look at every. So now I go to a bay and there's no welding in there. And you guys are
sitting around
leashing it for the inspector.
Yeah.
The inspector. And they're all looking at each other. And then we sat down, and I wasn't, I was giving them sort of a lecture in a light way, but I said, this is it. We want to do things right. And why not do it right? And I said, I'm methodical in the way I inspect because I'll stare. I don't want any interruptions. I don't want people talking to me, especially in something very critical. And you could miss a section yourself, which I have. So I said, take a block and do that.
Yeah.
There's an easy section in the block. Maybe there's the verticals you don't like doing, short overheads. Get them out of the way first, then clean up your slag. And as you're cleaning up what you should do anyway with your chipping hammer and wire brush, then look at it, and then, well, you got that block done.
Yeah.
And they sort of took it, all of them took it to heart, and a couple of them came up to me after and thanked, like individuals, right? So it's what you look at. And I tell every site I go on, I am dead against arc strikes. And I was working at another place, and it was ridiculous, the arc strikes. I couldn't, and we would never let our boss know that you had an arc strike.
Oh, you'd make the repair so fast. Yeah.
Yes, you know what I mean? Take the poly pan or whatever and grind that out or feather it out. It was ridiculous. So we had a conversation about that as well. And again, try to be positive. I don't go up and say, your well failed, Max. I say, look, this well doesn't meet requirements because of.
Yeah. What are we going to do to fix it?
Right. And that brings me to another, and again, supervisors, hopefully they're supervisors and teachers or
lead hands. Yeah.
That, well, a lot of people, and we don't expect everybody to know the code book off by hand, but I find that a lot of the welders for sure, and some of their supervisors, they don't understand the full allowances, or get away with is the wrong term, but what's acceptable and what's not. And a lot of times you go look at it. Well, you're allowed a certain percentage over 100-meter weld. You're allowed a percentage of a little undersized weld, and so I'll bring that to their attention, even though it's acceptable by our standards. I'll still bring the welder over and say, see, this is not 8 millimeters here. And you go, it might have been an arm stretch, Max, or it could be underneath a rat hole or something like this. And I'll just say, listen, it's undersized here, and I'm going to accept it. And it's not John Marshall accepting it; it's the code book accepting it. Yeah. And if people had more of an awareness of the code book, I think
there'll be a lot less fighting.
Better off too.
Yes. All right. Well, let's take a break right now for our advertisers. And when we get back, I want to continue with the story. So I'm loving this. I'm loving the story. So
okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah. So for our listeners, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here with John Marshall on the CWB Association podcast.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. I'm Max Ceron, and I'm here with John Marshall from Halifax, Nova Scotia, telling us his wonderful stories of his storied career. All right, here we are, John. Floor.
So it brings me back again. My friends call me anal, and I am, and especially I'm a peer inspector, and I go by the book. But there's other factors you had to. Bring into it. Again, degree of difficulty. It's got to be, it's definitely a factor. Where you see people putting a wedge in between two pipes so they can get the last, 100 millimeters around that pipe to get it in. And there's a lot of techniques out there. But when it comes to housekeeping, for example, like clean up your welds. If you clean up your welds, and I do every one, and if I do like a railing for a neighbor or something, I will take my bare hand and go over every inch of that railing, because we don't want
people to snag on it. Cut somebody or
Yes. So and people don't do that anymore. It's like get in and out as fast as you can. And I was on a job recently, and I had to go to the dollar store and get a little whisk or broom.
Mm-hmm.
so I could look at the welds. Like they didn't have it cleaned up for me, which then your eye gets sharper, Max.
Oh yeah, then now you're kind of pissed off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had to tell so many students, they give you, let's say, a hot piece of plate, maybe too hot that you shouldn't be looking at that time. You're looking at it, or a sharp edge.
Covered in spatter.
And yeah, and I just say, now, I've been around long enough, and my hands are fairly tough, but do you think you would pass this test if I had to cut my hand on this, and then I'll show them, a razor edge on it, and then they're looking at me, right? But it's backed. You don't want to piss off the inspector. You don't have to kiss up, but just do it right, and break your edges.
I had a boss that used to keep cotton gloves in his toolbox, and he would run a cotton glove across your weld, and if it caught, clean it up.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, man, this guy is a hard. But he would say, like, this is a $2.5 million piece of machinery. If you went and bought a Ferrari and the door didn't close right, or the paint was peeling off, would you buy it? No. Like, if you're buying expensive equipment, you expect perfection.
Yeah. And then again, not too long ago, I was on this job, and the flat welds were terrible. They were flux core. Yeah. They were terrible. And they did a lot of time grinding. And I said, this is not acceptable. Yeah, but we got the leg length. I said, you don't have profile. And then you'd see a beautiful vertical. And I said, what's going on here? I had to approach QA guys, and he couldn't answer me, but it's pretty hard to mess up a flat fillet weld.
And then you nail the vertical.
The verticals were beautiful.
Yeah.
Equal leg length, and so when I look at a job, and I tell this to the young inspectors as well, coming out of school, we have a school here with Tony Rose, as you know.
Yeah. Who just retired. Tony just retired. Yes. So props to Tony. I love Tony.
Yeah. So anyway, I had a couple of those young inspectors under my wing when I was working, and they'd shadow me for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And I had a lot of fun with that. And hopefully I taught them things. They get out of school, they couldn't tell you a piece of Schedule 40 from Schedule 80 pipe, or a piece of, really, because they weren't welders.
Well, and if they're not welders, the inspector course is only a couple weeks. How much are you going to learn in a couple weeks, right? Like,
yeah. And I asked every one of them, where's your magnet? First thing you go to is your magnet. So I just say, when I'm doing an inspection, here's my train of thought. And I do a lot of bridges now. If this weld fails, is somebody going to die?
Yeah.
That's the first thing that enters my mind. Some people say you should look at every weld as critical, but we don't. It's human nature. The second one is, what's the cost of repair if the weld fails? If you get inside a communications room on a ship, and there's the
electronics and panels and all
the electronics, and the removals are $250,000 just to remove it, to get at it. That's the third factor, or second factor. And then the third factor is coating or longevity, or how to not access it, but how to preserve it.
Yeah, how well.
Very difficult. Right. Yeah. Let's do it right the first time. So my vision gets better the more critical the welds are. And you really got to pay attention, and especially with a little bit of undercut on a pressure vessel, for example, and you try to teach the students and the welders. Look, if you did this, file that off, or just touch that with a grinder and break the sharp edge, we're all good, and keep things positive.
Now, what about in terms of the experiences you've had? Like, do you think it's easier or harder now to be a welder, say from 20 years ago?
Uh, the the biggest failures I see is leg length, and
Yeah.
I deal with some pretty good companies, and they are good companies. But you go and you put your fillet weld gauge, and one guy said to me, he said, 8 millimeter weld. You don't know what an 8 millimeter weld is? And Max, I said, I do know what an 8 millimeter uh, fillet weld is, but you know what? If this fails and I end up in a court of law and the judge says, did you measure that weld? I can say, I most certainly did weld it.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge will ask me, how do you know that? Because I measure every weld.
Yeah.
Don't get offended.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's
not
just some of the
personal. Yeah.
attitude. No. But I find a lot of the companies now, um, it calls for an 8 millimeter weld, and you'll see a 6. Leg length is probably the biggest thing that I mark up on a drawing now or on the site. Increase the fillet weld, and again, they're putting it out fairly fast. Time is money.
Yeah.
And we do get complacent. Oh, that's 8 millimeter. Everything must be 8 millimeter. Then you hit a 10 millimeter, and yeah.
And vice versa, right? It goes up and down. But I mean, as you get skilled as a welder, especially a certified welder, like, I mean, you carry your fillet gauges in your pocket. You start to really figure out what's right and what's not right.
And how to lay it in.
That's right. That's right. And if you get yelled at by a couple inspectors in your career, you also learn how that works, right? Like, you don't.
Yes. Yeah. And another big positive that came with my career, again, this is when I was in the dockyard with D&D, and there's more than one aspect. We did all lifting appliances on the ship, so you learn hydraulics and wire rope. I did wire rope courses, but paint and welding tie in so close together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to teach everybody on that project why we do this. Like, you can't leave the spatter. You can't, and round the edges. And they are in the industry now, on a lot of the bridge work. They have the nibblers and they have the grinders, and they radius the corners on the edges with the paint. That's a big help.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what about your life as a volunteer? Because I met you through the Canadian Welding Association, the CWA is when I first met you. And my dad was a part of this community, so I remember WIC. I remember all going way back.
Yeah.
But for yourself, when did you get into that aspect of it, of contributing to your community, not from a monetary side, but from an educational side?
I never did mind sharing knowledge, and so I guess the apprenticeship in the dockyard was where I started, and so you take some were better than others, but you take people under your wing and say, okay, here's what we do, why we do it, and then if they would ask me a question, Max, and I'm like that today, I will find out the answer. And I remember this young fella, Simon. Simon was from Newfoundland out north. And this is funny. Anyway, I came in the dockyard, green as green could be, and introduced. I said, where are you from, Simon? He said, Shuko, bye. I said, Shuko. I said, is that up by Lassie? Yes, bye. 3 mile. 2 if you go real fast. But Simon was great. He did the apprenticeship, and he absorbed every word that I said. But he asked me a question one day, and I couldn't understand it. And I've been in the welding industry now for 5 or 6 years, and we were down in an engine room, and he was slinging his electrode holder. I don't know if it was 60. We used a lot of 6011 back then. And he was swinging around, and there was brass fittings and gauges, like, a tight machinery space. And he did strike an arc. And I don't know now if it was on the brass or whatever. And I said, Simon, what are you doing? Yeah. So anyway, we did fix whatever it was, or told somebody about what we did. And I said, Simon, if you're in a tight confine, you take the electrode out of the electrode holder till you get in, and you get down on your elbows and push it in so you can. So he hit the brass. Yes, it was brass. And he said, something, I don't know the exact question, but he said, is that a metal? And I said, certainly brass is a metal. And he said, well, what's the definition of a metal? And I did not know it. And I'm not going to rhyme it off to you now, but it's about 20-word definition,
Yeah.
And it was quite a definition. So then I learned that, and that's the way I am. If he asked me the question, I learned something, and I told him what a metal was, and it is quite a definition.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't know brass and steel were metals, I guess. We knew steel was a metal, but he didn't know brass was a metal.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so I always enjoyed that part. And when you take a young protege or whatever
Mentee,
and they succeed and they pass their first welding test or they graduate and next thing they're an inspector, it makes you feel good too.
It does. It does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what about your volunteer work with the chapters directly? When did you start with doing that?
That was back in the Jim Reed days. And I don't know how long. We went to meetings, and there was a core group of us too that sort of got together. Jim was stepping down and we were redundant. So we had meetings, and these seminars that the Halifax and Nova Scotia chapters put on were very good and very successful. And then we sort of dropped the ball with Jim leaving or whatever. And then we stepped up and trying to rejuvenate it again. So that's where it came from. And I got time. I could always manage my time well. And now I'm retired, and now Tony is retired. We don't know where this is going to go. And David's still got some work to do. And Charlie and Alan are still working. So I can put my, hand on the pulse most times. And
I don't know how retired you are, John. You don't sound that retired to me.
Yeah, that's my wife. Yeah. But
well, last year you guys ran that wonderful program. That blew my mind. You guys did such a great job with that.
We have a meeting. I got an email yesterday with Nova Scotia Community College. We're going to do it again. Maybe not with the introduction of aluminum, but something else. And you'll be involved this time with the advertising aspect of it. But that was very successful. And we are also bringing in hard surfacing seminar.
Oh, fun.
So we already contacted a company. They're going to bring in the rep, Studi, or whoever. Don't know who it's going to be yet, but they're going to bring in the hard surfacing. We're going to hopefully host it at Akerley campus in Dartmouth. And we don't know yet. We don't know yet if it's going to be hands-on welding because of, space and numbers. We don't know the numbers yet, Max, but yes, we have a couple of irons in the fire again now.
That's fun.
I really want to see that. I really want to see the hard surfacing. I talked to so many people, including one of the instructors, and they've never used it. They don't understand it. It's the hardness. I don't even know if they understand the hardness of it.
And how different it welds.
Rockwell values.
Right? Like hard surfacing rods weld so different.
Yes.
Right? They don't even look the same. They don't even sound the same.
No. And then do you need an underlay? Do you need the crisscross pattern? Or, if you
butter it up.
Yeah. So that's going to be an interesting one. And we'll probably put that on at Akerley and put it out to the world through you and say, we got to look at numbers, of course, but let's say there's 25 or 30. We'll give it to the students. At Akerley, that'll be a bonus on us type thing. And then anybody in the fringes that are interested, they can get knowledge from it as well.
Awesome, man. How is the industry doing in your area? Like, how are you feeling about Atlantic provinces now? For the listeners that are listening, I see Irving's hiring all over the place. Is there work? I'm in Western Canada. We always had the East Coasters come to us, right? It was always like the East Coasters come to us in shutdown season.
Yeah.
They were always good welders, hard workers, but then they'd go home.
Yeah.
Right now, is that migration still happen?
The migration is still happening. We have a lot of bridge work, and I mean, Irving still got the shipyards. RKO are putting up buildings. There's a lot of cranes around, a lot of building, but I mean, that's more clips and base plates and whatnot. There's
ironworker work,
yeah, and but for the most part, it is the shipbuilding here in Halifax, and again, Cherubini and bridge work. I know of. We just finished one bridge, and there's another one going down in Muscadabat. I took you down Muscadabat way one time, but
that was a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a bridge going, and that's only an I-beam girder bridge. That's not big, but some of the bridges we are doing big tub girders. I don't know. Oh, the Seal Island Bridge. You want to look that up. That's in Cape Breton, and that is a massive job. And the last I heard, they had two bids, full reconstruction, which would take probably 10 to 20 years.
Wow.
Or I call it the Band-Aid, which will take an ongoing for 10 years.
Yeah.
But it's a massive job. It's a nice looking bridge. If you want to look it up, the Seal Isle Bridge, Cape Breton. And every truck that comes from Newfoundland going to or from crosses that bridge. And it's quite a project, and it got quite a history.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, what about the students programs? Are you seeing lots of kids get into the trades in Atlantic provinces? I could probably ask Tony himself, but are the programs still full? Are they pumping out the welders? Because Lord knows we need them.
So, as far as I know, all classes are filled with a waiting list to get in.
Good.
As you know, the success rate or the percentages aren't great for people coming in and going out. With that, we're down around 30 or 40%.
Yeah, it's about 30% is the national average. Yeah.
Yeah. I promote welding as much as I can. I go and talk at high schools and whatever, and I quite frank, just the way I'm talking to you now, Max. Listen, I'm not here to tell you not to go to university. I'm here to say welding is a good trade, and most trades are good trades. But you mightn't like sawdust in your nose or down inside your shirt. You mightn't like welding sparks. But I'm here to tell you, your parents don't want to spend $20,000 to waste a year of your life in university.
If you're not into it,
yeah, if you're not interested. And then I tell a couple of war stories about my career, and I tell them I started in 1979. Their parents weren't born then, and that opens you up. But I do say, even in the hard times, which we're going to hit pretty soon, the Irvings are going to hold their own, but the farmers and the fishermen still need things repaired, and even in the hardest times, you will be able to put supper on the table. And that's
right.
The way.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the practical skills never stop being needed. It doesn't have to do with the price of the market. It doesn't have to do with the barrel of oil. Sure, maybe today you made $50 an hour, and tomorrow you're only making $20 an hour. I get that. That might suck.
Yeah.
But your job is there. The skill is there.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I really believe in that.
Well, I've been through 3 economic downturns as a welder. In your career, you've probably been through 4 or 5 now. And at the end of the day, we still have our trades and our careers, and we put, like you said, we still put supper on the table.
Yeah, for sure. It's and again, there's so much room for advancement now. So go back to your question about is it easier to weld now as opposed to 1980? I love stick welding. And I don't know how you weld. I don't think I ever saw you weld, and you probably never saw me. I'm keep the puddle in motion type guy.
Okay.
And then I see some of the younger people coming in, they just drag that in, and I tried it. It's not for me. And with me, I've always got the puddle in motion. How about
Mhm.
you?
I can do both, but I like to keep it nice and steady.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm going a vertical, I got the little smile going on each side.
Yeah.
1, 2, hold, 1, 2, hold, and you just drag it straight up.
I can. Depends on the rod, of course, but
Yeah.
like, I mean, a 7018, I don't mind running a stringer straight up the wall. It looks nice.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were talking about wire then.
No, for wire,
but
for GMAW, yeah, I'd probably do a little bit of a weave there. There'd be a little motion, yeah.
yeah. But I see some people dragging it right up, and I don't really like the profile. It's there. It's acceptable.
You get a lot of crown. You get a lot of crown, yeah.
Yeah. So, you got metal core, flux core, solid wire. I'm not a fan of solid wire. I don't know enough about it. I haven't used it enough, but I find that the fusion isn't there, for me.
Yeah.
And did you weld much solid wire?
I have done tons in my career, yeah. Both flux
Yeah.
core, metal core, and solid wire. I never
Yeah.
had problems with penetration, but there's more room for error with solid wire. If you don't dial it in, you won't get that root pellet penetration.
Yeah. There you go. That's my observation as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's so many different factors. Aluminum has come such a long way.
Well, and I'm a terrible aluminum welder. That's my weakness. I'm not good at aluminum.
Yeah. Again, it's I never walked a cup in my life because that wasn't invented when I was doing it, but it seems to be a success thing.
Mm-hmm.
But aluminum, like I said, everything is so refined now with the pulse arc and
the technology, yeah,
technology and the wires and the alloys in there. It's so aluminum is basically easy to weld if you follow.
Yeah, now it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I tried running aluminum on just straight negative polarity, and I just made the biggest mess you'd ever make. And I was thinking, well, I can't do this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Another funny story. I was down in my apprenticeship, and I was in we call it the TIG corner. So that's where you learned how to weld the aluminum. And old Tommy Brown, he's probably long gone now, but he was an old welder, very, very finesse welder.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a thin, like, I'm going to say 20 gauge.
Wow.
A little tiny tank or something he was doing. And he went for break. During break, one of my buddies came up and said, "Can you weld this?" It was a home job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go up and I cranked it up from, let's say from, you know what happened, right?
Oh yeah.
I cranked it up, and let's say I'm welding 1/4 inch aluminum, and I changed over the tungsten, probably a 1/8 tungsten, or and cranked up the voltage and amperage and did what I had to do, and then I changed it back, put his 1/16 tungsten in there, and changed it back to the small torch. Anyway, I forgot to switch it back. He came back and he almost had this job done, Max, and he blew aside of that whole vessel. He wasn't happy with me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you don't make friends playing with other people's welding machines.
No, that's for sure. I don't think he talked to me for a couple of days. Yeah.
Now, John,
but that happens too.
Yeah, it does happen. We all make mistakes, and that's part of that's part of the industry too. Like, I mean, sometimes you see people around you make mistakes, and you got to support them and teach them and hope they get better. I mean, some people don't learn, and then you figure out who they are too, right? So
yeah. Now keep it positive, Max, and again, even if you don't make it for whatever, if it's a visual or it fails on a bend test or something like that, or lack of fusion, we all know about that. And just change something, one thing at a time. Don't change 5 things, and sort of work them through it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, what's in the future for you, John? When you look at the next 5 years of your life, 10 years of your life, what is it that's on the bucket list for you to do? What's going on for you for projects?
I'm starting to wind down a little bit. Starting to wind down a little bit.
I don't
My
believe you.
credentials.
I don't. You just told me you still
My-
play hockey 3 times a week, for crying out loud.
I'm playing tomorrow. Well, at 2:00. Anyway, Max, my welding certification, my welding inspection certification runs out when I'm 69.
Mm.
And I said I'd like to keep going till I'm then, and then I'll look at it again, right?
Yeah.
And same with my paint certification. They're sort of on a parallel. And we'll see where it goes. But again, I enjoy it. I talked to Tony, and I might try to put a bit more time in the Canadian Welding Association, like from this end, and try to really get things moving along.
Well, I'm here to support you, buddy. I'm here to support you.
Yeah.
Any ideas you have, I love them.
Oh yeah. Well, like I say, let's get these two underway with Nova Scotia Community College, and then we'll trying to get our numbers up is the big thing with me, and getting a true value on our numbers and how to get people in,
to come out,
active again. Yeah.
Well, you got students and you got industry. We got to find that secret sauce. We got to find that secret sauce to get it all put together. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I had another thing I was going to tell you. I can't remember now, but you keep talking and it'll come back up again. But,
well, I know before we started, you told me I got to make sure I say the one thing. Did we get the one thing? Did we cover the one thing?
Yeah, that was a escape tower.
Okay, good.
That was the escape tower. Yeah.
Because, those stories sometimes are the most valuable ones, because it's easy to focus on the positive. It's easy to be like, everything I built is great. Everything I built is wonderful.
No, I know.
But no, there's sometimes things can go sideways really bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I did the airport overpass here in Halifax, probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, less. And an engineering company went up, and there was only 6 girders, I think, I-beam girders. And they did a inspection on it, and they said there was 3 repairs on the airport side and 1 repair on the racetrack side going over the main highway.
Mm-hmm.
So the contract was let, and then the staging is put in place. The roadways are closed off and, slowed down. And so I get up, and again, I love rust. I made my living from rust. And I know where to look, and I had taken corrosion courses and how it works and what happens and all that. So I got up and that's staging, and I start tapping things with my hammer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a hole, and I don't know about. I'm sent on the job, and
mm-hmm.
So when I finished, I said, we got troubles, and I called up the guy who hired me, and I said, I took pictures, and they had 4 repairs. When I was finished, there was 19 repairs, at least 6 meters or 2 meters long each. You could put your hand through it. And I had engineers on the staging. And if you know how turbulence works underneath the bridge with the sand and the salt and the water and the rain, it at the lower flange of the I-beam, it's just eaten out on both sides.
It's just gone.
And I had engineers looking at me. There's no hole there. In other words, we don't need to fix it. So I said, everybody here got hearing protection. I took out my hammer and I hit that, and there was a hole there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it was 15 millimeters. Well, what I could see, it was less than a millimeter left if it wasn't holed.
Mm-hmm.
So then it just so happened the sandblast guys were getting geared up. And I said, we all stepped out.
Give it a shot. Yeah.
The turret. Give that a shot. And then you can put your hand through it. And we had engineers saying, well, it's not holed. And they ended up with 19 repairs at the end of that.
Yeah, that's full cutouts. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a meeting called. I wasn't invited to it, but the next morning there was a meeting called with DOT, Nova Scotia Department of Transport, the guy who hired me, who was also an engineer, the engineering firm, and I don't know what came of it, but it was quite a to-do, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Well, again, you got to know where to look and how to look.
That's
and they're
right.
talking about doing drones now, doing bridges. And I got to ask my opinion on that. And I sort of like the idea, but I said, you can't see through that road grime, that sand laying there. It has to be clean.
Yeah, there has to
gotta
be
be able to see it.
contact. Yeah, there's got to be some contact there.
Yeah. So, I mean, drones might be okay.
For visual, for maybe some basic stuff, but it won't tell you the whole story.
Yeah. No, it's hard to get at places where they don't, the painters don't like to go with their hair to get it. Everybody can paint the panel on a tub girder. It's wide open. It's in the corners and up underneath a piece of structural steel. And that's where it corrodes, and that's where it's not painted proper. So I'm anal like that as well. You go to the hard spots.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, John, thanks so much for being a part of this show today. You're a wonderful volunteer for the association. We love the work you're doing out there. And I just love running into you because we always have a great time.
Oh, yes. No. And Red Deer.
Yeah, Red Deer. Yeah, June 11th. You going to be there?
Hoping to.
Good. We'll be there. The NAC's on the 10th, so I'll be seeing you there for that meeting.
Well, yeah, that's a good reminder. I got to get the boys on that now and see what's going to happen.
Awesome, John. Anything you'd like to say to anybody before I let you go? Any last minute words of wisdom?
It's all good. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, let's keep it going. I like that.
Thank you for your time. And I did watch some of your podcasts. They're quite interesting. And hopefully I got to send a little bit of a message to somebody, Max, and then keep it light, like you say. You're allowed to have fun at work.
You are. And, well, you make my work fun, so I appreciate it.
No.
All right. Okay. Thank you. And for all the people...
I got to watch hockey now. Americans are playing.
Yeah, I know.
I got to go watch hockey.
4 nations, yeah.
Yeah.
Just hold on a second while I say goodbye here. So thank you, everyone, for being a part of today's show. Keep downloading, sharing, and commenting on our shows. We're having lots of fun here with the podcast. This is part of Volunteer Appreciation Month, and we really appreciate volunteers like John and all the great members and chapter work that we have across this beautiful country of ours. So keep Canada strong, keep our standards up there, and, work hard and do what's best for the industry. Until the next episode, I'll see you there.
We hope you enjoyed the show.